and welcome to chapter one. This week's chapter one, we are going to be reading chapter one of Blowing Up a Murder, book eight in the Kenny Lowry mystery series. Chapter one. Oh, Finn. My heart twirled around just looking at him in the suit and out of his Clay's Ferry uniform. I'd seen him in that uniform a lot more often than regular clothes. I never thought it was going to be a shock to see him in the new Navy sheriff's getup, since I was used to seeing him in the baby poop brown, almost yellow sheriff's uniform we wore in Cottonwood. We being me, Scott Lee, and Betty Murphy. I lumped Betty in there because she didn't participate in the uniform daily. She claimed the button up shirt and pants were too stiff for her arthritis. I would have believed her if she'd worn some sort of easier outfit instead of jeans and a different buttoned cardigan every day, but who was keeping score? It was one of those things Mama stuck in my head, obey your elders. That went for work as well, even if my elder was an employee. What? Finn caught me looking at him. His freshly cut black hair was shorter than normal, which was fine by me because his big brown eyes became his best feature. His hand held mine, and both of them were resting on his thigh. You look handsome, I smiled, since this was like the umpteenth time I'd told him since he'd picked me up for the wedding. A wedding of two people I didn't know and had no clue who these people were. It was one of those invitations where all government officials were invited, and since I was right in Cottonwood, Scott was at the department in case any calls came in. Scott got the job since it was Saturday, and Betty didn't work on the weekends, and I got all gussied up and dragged Finn with me. He was sort of a buffer between me and Mama, who, by the way, was sitting next to me, sticking her fingernail in my ribs and giving it a little twist. Aren't spring weddings so lovely? Mama's nail dug a smidgen deeper. Stop, I warned with a head jerk her way. What? Mama's southern drawl came out as if she didn't know what she was doing. I was talking to Lulu. You always have to worry about rain. And from what Edna Easterly posted in today's Cottonwood Chronicles, it's going to come a gusher later on this afternoon. Lulu McLean's head had stuck up between me and Mama's shoulders. She'd been seated behind us and scooted up on the edge of the bench where she laid her forearms along the back of our pew so she and Mama could talk about the wedding. Lulu had short black hair and owned Lulu's Boutique, located on Main Street in downtown Cottonwood. She had very trendy items in the shop and catered to the South, horses, and the state of Kentucky. By talk, I meant gossip, and they sure didn't care who heard them. That's why I think you need to have a summer wedding, Ruby Smith, who sat next to Lulu, put in her 2 cents, along with a light touch on my shoulder. Her short red hairstyle was a staple for Ruby, as was her bright orange lipstick. She, along with Mama and a few other friends in Cottonwood, were known as the Henny Hens, though really most of them were part of the Auxiliary Women's Club where they met years ago. Tell her, Vi, Ruby followed up. She encouraged my mama to keep playing the fantasy in her head that somehow Finn had popped the question, and he had not. He hadn't even mentioned the possibility of us getting married, though his parents had come to Cottonwood to meet me and my family, and well, that didn't go over well. Flowers are lovely in the summer. Myra was telling me the other day when I went down to the pedal pushers to get a spring wreath for the front door how Penny screamed summer wedding with the billowing petals that gave off a delightful scent. Mama's excitement was oozing out of her with the thought. Did you know pennies come in several vibrant colors? They come in pink, yellow, and white hues that would go with any bridesmaid's dress. Plus, they are a larger bloom, so you get more bang for your buck. That's what Myrna said. I can see it now. Ruby fanned her jeweled fingers out in front of her. Her arms were filled with bangles that were rattling with the hand swoop. Gorgeous sunny days with those light pinks on each table in a round glass bowl filled with just over half water. The henny hens didn't care what I had to say. They had Mama's back and agreed with whatever she was going to say. If I knew something about hens, it was that they were nosy. Mama and all her friends put their noses in everything. That included everything was nothing about them. That did make my job a little harder at times, especially when it came to crimes around Cottonwood. They'd hear something on the police scanner. Every household had one, and be at the scene before I could get there. Since I was Mama's daughter, they felt they could not only get private police information from me, but also tell me how to run an investigation. I think fall is lovely too. Mama's chin lifted as she kept her gaze forward before she shifted her eyes enough to take a gander at me to see if I was looking at her. And it would give us a few months to prepare. Lulu only made the situation worse. Mama sighed and looked ahead as I was engaged to Finn had come true. It had not, as I had said earlier. The church is so pretty in the fall, too. Myrna did mention how rich and warm fall's most popular blooms can be. Mama gave a very satisfying sigh. What she said made real sense too, Mama nodded. She said no matter what the theme of the wedding, like rustic, chic, or classic, all those dramatic oranges, red, yellows, purples, and even brown hues found in the fall are gorgeous. I'm thinking Delilah's. Lulu patted me on the back. I didn't turn to look at her. Don't you love the weather in the fall, Kenny? I thought Finn was a Catholic, Ruby asked, as if religion left a bad taste in her mouth. Do you ladies not see me sitting right here? Finn dropped my hand and extended an arm over me and rested it around my shoulders, taking up the back of the pew and forcing Ruby and Lulu to scoot back into their seats. We are just talking, Finn. You don't have to get all highfalutin now that you've got that big city job in Clay's Ferry. Ruby's remark to him garnered a few snickers. Myrna has done a real fine job with these arrangements, but everyone seems to be getting married in the spring. Only special weddings are in the fall. Mama had it set in her mind that I was getting married in the fall. Again, I shot her a look. What, Kenny? Mama put her hand on her chest like she was appalled at even looking at me. I didn't say it. Ruby did. She shimmied her shoulder. The whole religion thing had been a sore topic of conversation. And when Finn and I had both skirted since our parents had a huge disagreement over which church their grandchildren would attend. Talk about putting the cart before the horse. Finn and I were nowhere near getting married, much less having children. Thank you, I whispered to Finn and looked over where I'd heard the side of the door of the church open. A man who I assumed was the groom walked out behind Preacher Bing and four other groommen. They had on long black tuxedo with tails and top hats. Oh my, they've gone all out. Mama leaned over and acted as if she wanted me to hear, but the henny hens behind her moaned an mm-hmm. The traditional wedding song filtered over the speaker, signaling us to stand, a tradition we did as soon as the bride was appeared to start her walk down the aisle. I kept facing forward so I didn't have to fight to see the tip top of the bride's veil over the crowd of people behind me. But the murmurs and gasps, along with the clicks of cameras, told me she was a sight to behold. Kenny, I heard my name in a faint whisper behind Finn's shoulder was Polly Parker Ryland, the First Lady of Cottonwood. Do you mind moving your head? She jutted her phone at me, clearly wanting to get a shot of the bride. I slumped down. Those are family pearls. Antiques. Ruby had leaned forward and wiggled a finger at the bride when she walked past. And Ruby would know what was antique and what wasn't because she owned Ruby's Antiques on Main Street. Treasures to her, but whenever I went down there, it smelled old. That was what antiques were to me, just old. Are they? Mama danced back and forth on her shoes to see around the people in front of us so she could try to get a glimpse of the family heirloom. She's got too much lace on her face. I could leave it to Mama to find something wrong with the bride. Luckily, she did whisper that, so no one else heard. Why did wedding always bring out the soft side of people? The entire ceremony, Finn held my hand, squeezing it during the sweet moments that didn't go unnoticed between the bride and the groom. They had all the attention on them, not mine. I had assessed the church, locating the accessible exits, since some were blocked by candelabras filled to overflowing wildflowers. I'd been to a church here a million times and knew the exit. It was by habit that I took in all the surroundings for the just in case there's an emergency situation. While I did so, I couldn't help but notice one of the groomsmen stood a little further away than the rest and wasn't really included in the heckling some of the other groomsmen had given the groom. All the bride was all smiles, as were the bridesmaids. The groomsmen, who were all business, had to have some be relatives of the groom. After all, he was the one who had the ring in his pocket and seemed to give the groom more sincere, brotherly love type interaction during the ceremony. After the bride and groom kissed and the final trumpet sent them down the aisle, Mama jumped to her feet. We've got to get to the reception. I heard it was to die for. Mama would have ridden on the bride's train if she could have. You've got to wait until they release the pews one by one, Mama. I had to hold her back by keeping a fistful of the back of her dress in my hand. Now, Kenny, don't be ridiculous. I know what good manners are, but I'm telling you, you might have use the siren to bypass all these people going to the reception. She loved to think that she was always within the law, but when it came time for me to use it on her, she was willing to break it. I gave her another look. I know you can't use your siren to get us to the front of the reception, but it sure would be nice if we got there and got a good seat. You never know. She plucked the white gloves out of her handbag and smacked me with them before she slipped them on. You might get some good pointers. Tibby has already saved us a seat. I pointed to Mama, me, Finn, and the Henny Hens, which now included Viola White and Myrna Savage, all perched in the row behind us. Tibby Bell was one of my best friends, and she was the event planner. When she got the call about the job, we'd heard all about it for a year. Now the big day was here, and honestly, I wasn't sure where or who had provided the invitations for the bride and the groom. And while I was really invited, the election thing was something that I just made up since all the elected government officials were here. But again, I was good at noticing things, and I noticed everyone who was an elected official had been invited to this wedding. That's the way it was in Cottonwood. Weddings were a big deal. They were almost as big as having a baby and having a funeral. Funerals were also a social gathering not to be missed. No matter who they were, or how well you knew the deceased. In Cottonwood, those three events were always happening, which meant we were always together and pitched in wherever we could. When I looked around while waiting our turn to be let out of the pew, I saw a lot of town folks there with big smile on their faces, talking to one another and being neighborly. And as sheriff, I love seeing a community like that. Cottonwood wasn't always rosy. I mean, I saw a few neighbors here socializing, but if I went to their houses, they'd be bickering back and forth about rose bushes a little over the property line or how someone let their papers sit in their driveway too long. But not today. Today was a celebration of happiness and love. Here you go. The serious groomman just so happened to be the one who let us out of the pew. The bride is very environmentally friendly, so they're using bubbles to blow instead of rice to throw, he said, and handed me a clear plastic bottle with bubble water inside. Isn't that clever? Mama looked over her shoulder at me and tipped her chin down and lifted her brows. See, something you can do. Keep walking, I told her. The sunshine filtered through the doors as the back of the church that were spread wide open for us to gather outside. Looky there, clouds. Lulu pointed off to the west where there were a few dark clouds in the sky. Sunny one minute, raining the next. That's spring weather for you. And by the look of the moving cloud, the rain was going to be coming fast. I sure hope they make it to the reception before then, Ben said and gestured to a white horse drawn carriage that was open to the elements. Smile, you two lovebirds. Edna Easterly held her camera up to her eyes. I was a little taken back by Edna's appearance. She wasn't dressed in her fishing vest with all the pockets that held all her journalist gadgets, and her feathered fedora hat with the glued on note card where she proudly written reporter with a marker. A little closer, like you're in love. She gestured at us as we got a little closer. Look into the camera and smile. As soon as she clicked the shutter, a big bolt of lightning broke through the sky. Whew, that made me shiver. I shook a little bit before the goosebumps crawled along my arms. Mom pinched. Someone's walking over your grave, Kenny. Chapter 1, Blowing Up a Murder.